Maya pressed her palm against the fractured window of her deteriorating vessel, watching her fingers shake as they traced the spider web cracks. The distant suns burned with merciless intensity, their harsh radiance mirroring the emptiness that had consumed her spirit. Every pinprick of light felt like an accusation, a reminder of how thoroughly her existence had unraveled beneath the weight of an unforgiving universe. A gentle, inquisitive voice pierced the oppressive quiet. "Mama, how much longer?" 7-year-old. Kira tugged at Maya's worn sleeve, her opalescent eyes reflecting both curiosity and fatigue. Maya gazed down at her child, her features softening despite the tempest of emotions churning within her chest. Kira's pure innocence stood in stark opposition to the bleakness that had settled over Maya's world. "Not much further, sweetheart," Maya murmured, her tone gentle yet resolute. "The blue world awaits us just ahead." The voyage to reach this moment had been nothing short of torturous. Maya's birth world, Valdris, had been a realm of gleaming spires, technological wonders, and inflexible cultural codes. Every aspect of existence was governed by ancient customs that demanded absolute conformity. Households were held sacred, their cohesion reflecting one's dignity and position within the rigid social hierarchy. To exist beyond those boundaries meant a life of exile and contempt. Maya had once flourished at the heart of that system, celebrated and respected as the partner of Darius, a man whose aspirations stretched across the galaxy itself. He had been magnetic, audacious, and forward-thinking, a rising force within Valdris's power structure. Maya had cherished him completely, their connection appearing unshakable. They had spent countless hours discussing their aspirations, plans to venture into uncharted territories, and the heritage they would create for their daughter. But aspirations have a cruel way of warping into torment. Darius's hunger for achievement devoured him entirely. What had started as a pursuit of knowledge and exploration twisted into avarice. He became entangled with dangerous smuggling operations, aligning himself with shadowy figures who promised wealth and influence. Maya had begged him to reconsider, to remember Kira's needs, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. One morning, without any warning, he vanished. Initially, Maya waited with unwavering faith. She believed he would return, that the man she loved would honor his commitments to his family. Days became weeks, weeks stretched into months. The brutal reality seeped in gradually, like ice spreading through her veins. Darius was never coming back. His desertion wasn't merely an emotional wound, it became a mark of shame. On Valdris, abandoned mothers were branded as failures, women who couldn't preserve their family's harmony. They became subjects of whispered gossip in public spaces, their children either pitied or openly rejected. Maya's once brilliant life dimmed under the crushing weight of social condemnation and isolation. "Mama," Kira's voice drew Maya back to the present moment. The child's complexion was ashen, her cheeks sunken from days of rationed meals. Maya pressed her lips together, guilt and determination battling within her soul. She knelt down, gently brushing a wayward strand of silver hair from Kira's face. "You're incredibly strong, my little comet," she whispered, planting a tender kiss on Kira's forehead. "Just hold on a bit longer." The ship's mechanisms groaned ominously, a harsh reminder of its failing condition. Maya glanced at the navigation display. The blue-green world hung before them, its vibrant colors vivid against the cosmic void. A fragment of hope penetrated her despair. This planet, according to the limited intelligence she had managed to acquire, was supposedly home to a benevolent species. Humans, they were called? Perhaps they would offer what Valdris had denied, an opportunity for her and Kira to reconstruct their shattered lives. The atmospheric entry was catastrophic. Warning signals blared as the ship's deteriorating systems fought to manage the violent descent. Maya clenched her jaw, her hands flying across the control panel as she struggled to maintain stability. Kira clung to her arm, her small frame trembling with terror. "Everything's fine, Kira. I'm here," Maya said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her throat. The vessel shuddered violently, a thunderous crack echoing through the cabin as a control panel exploded in a shower of sparks. Smoke billowed through the air, stinging Maya's eyes. She activated the emergency protocols, praying the craft wouldn't disintegrate before they reached solid ground. Finally, with a bone-jarring impact, the spacecraft skidded to a halt. The silence that followed was almost overwhelming. Maya sat motionless for a moment, her ears ringing and her heart hammering against her ribs. "Mama!" Kira's small voice broke through the stillness. Maya unbuckled herself and stumbled to her daughter's side, examining her for injuries with trembling hands. "Are you hurt?" Lena shook her head, her eyes wide but composed. "I'm fine." Relief flooded through Maya, and she pulled Kira into a fierce embrace. "Brave girl," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The planet's surface presented a dramatic contrast to Valdris's polished, luminous cities. This world's landscape was untamed and rugged. Ancient trees swayed against the turbulent wind, their branches reaching toward the storm-darkened sky. Rain fell in torrents, drenching Maya as she carried Kira from the wreckage. She surveyed the area quickly, her eyes scanning for potential dangers. The environment was alien to her, its scents and sounds foreign, but there was no time to dwell on her discomfort. Kira needed protection from the elements. Using fragments of the ship's debris, Maya constructed a makeshift shelter beneath the protective canopy of a massive evergreen. The rain seeped through gaps in her construction, but it provided some respite from the relentless downpour. Maya wrapped Kira in a thermal blanket, sitting close to shield her from the bitter cold as the storm raged around them. Maya's mind raced with concern. She possessed no resources, no allies, and no understanding of how this planet's inhabitants might react to their arrival. But as she watched Kira's peaceful expression, her determination crystallized. She had not traveled this far to surrender now. For hours, Maya maintained her vigil, her keen eyes scanning the darkness for signs of threat. The storm began to weaken, the rain softening to a steady rhythm. Exhaustion tugged at her consciousness, but she refused to succumb. She couldn't afford to be vulnerable. Just as dawn began to break, painting the sky with pale streaks of amber, Maya's ears detected a rustling in the nearby undergrowth. Her heart leaped into her throat. She tightened her grip on a sharp piece of metal she had salvaged from the wreckage, prepared to defend her daughter at any cost. A figure emerged from the mist, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with deliberate caution that suggested both curiosity and wariness. Maya's breath caught in her chest. This was no Valdrian. It was a human. For the first time since fleeing Valdris, Maya felt the delicate emergence of both hope and fear. Marcus trudged through the waterlogged pasture, his boots sinking deeper with each step. The violent storm had transformed his usually serene homestead into a landscape of chaos. Fencing had collapsed under the wind's fury, and scattered tools lay strewn across the sodden earth. He muttered a quiet oath under his breath, pulling his jacket tighter against the persistent drizzle that continued to fall from the gray sky. It was supposed to be a simple evening, a routine check of the property boundaries before retiring for the night. But the strange glow in the distance had captured his attention. At first, he had dismissed it as a trick of the storm, perhaps a stray lightning strike. Yet the light didn't waver or disappear. It pulsed with steady, faint persistence, like a signal. Curiosity compelled him forward, and despite his weariness, Marcus followed the mysterious illumination. Maya tightened her grip on the jagged metal. Fragment, her gaze fixed on the figure approaching through the fog. Her muscles were coiled like springs, ready to react if this human, this towering, broad-shouldered being posed any threat. The man halted several feet away, his features obscured by the brim of his hat. He remained motionless for a moment, seemingly assessing the situation. Then, slowly, he raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Easy there," he said, his voice deep and cautious but free of hostility. "Didn't mean to frighten you." Maya didn't lower her improvised weapon. The language he spoke was unfamiliar yet recognizable, something she had studied in preparation for her journey to this world. The words felt awkward on her tongue, but she forced herself to respond. "Keep your distance," she said, her voice sharp despite the tremor in her hands. The man nodded, taking a deliberate step backward. "Understood. No harm intended." His gaze shifted to the small figure pressed against her side. Kira peered out from beneath the blanket, her luminous eyes wide with fascination. Marcus's brow creased with confusion, but there was no mistaking the concern that flickered across his weathered features. "You two look like you've been through hell," he said after a moment. "You're soaked through. I've got a warm house not far from here, food, dry clothes. You can rest there if you'd like." Maya hesitated. The offer seemed genuine, but her trust had been shattered too many times to accept kindness without suspicion. She glanced at Kira, whose small frame shivered, despite the blanket wrapped around her. The decision wasn't about her, it was about Kira. Always Kira. "Fine," she said finally, her tone clipped. "But if you attempt anything, I won't," Marcus interrupted gently. "You have my word." Marcus led them back to his farmhouse, his steps, careful as he navigated the uneven terrain. Maya stayed close behind him, her grip on the metal shard never loosening. Kira clung to her mother's side, her small feet slipping in the mud as they walked. When the farmhouse came into view, Maya's sharp gaze absorbed every detail. It was a humble structure, its wooden exterior weathered but solid. A soft golden light glowed from the windows, casting a welcoming aura against the dreary landscape. Marcus pushed open the door and stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter first. Maya hesitated, scanning the interior before stepping cautiously across the threshold. The warmth of the room embraced her, a stark contrast to the cold rain outside. The space was simple yet inviting. A stone fireplace crackled in one corner, its warmth radiating through the air. A worn but comfortable-looking sofa sat near the hearth, and a wooden table occupied the center of the room. The scent of earth and pine lingered faintly, mixed with the aroma of fresh bread cooling on the counter. "You can sit," Marcus said, nodding toward the sofa. "I'll get some towels." Maya didn't move. Instead, she watched him closely as he disappeared into another room, her instincts on high alert. Kira, however, wandered toward the sofa, her eyes wide as she took in her surroundings. "Mama, it's so warm here," Kira whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Maya's chest tightened. She knelt beside her daughter, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "Stay close to me," she murmured, "always close." Marcus returned moments later with a pair of towels draped over his arm. He handed one to Maya and placed the other on the sofa for Kira. "Fire's warm. You're welcome to dry off," he said, stepping back to give them space. Maya accepted the towel but didn't let her guard down. She dried Kira first, wrapping her daughter snugly in the dry cloth before tending to herself. Her movements were quick and efficient, every action driven by the instinct to protect and provide. As the evening progressed, Marcus busied himself in the kitchen, giving Maya and Kira time to acclimate. He moved with quiet purpose, gathering ingredients and setting a pot on the stove. Maya watched him from her seat by the fire, her sharp eyes tracking his every movement. "Soup will be ready shortly," he said over his shoulder. "Nothing elaborate, but it'll warm you up." Maya didn't respond. Her mistrust lingered, but there was something about this man, his deliberate movements, his calm demeanor, that set him apart from others she had encountered. He didn't demand anything from her, didn't press for explanations. Instead, he simply provided. Kira, ever curious, broke the silence. What kind of soup? Marcus turned, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. It's food, warm food. You'll enjoy it. Maya frowned. She doesn't consume your food? Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't question her. Fair enough. If she gets hungry, let me know. I'll see what I can manage. Later, as Kira dozed on the sofa wrapped snugly in blankets, Marcus brought Maya a steaming bowl of soup. She eyed it warily before accepting, her hands trembling slightly as she held the bowl. You don't have to tell me anything, Marcus said, sitting across from her. Not where you're from, not why you're here. But I figure you've been through a lot. If you need a place to stay, you're welcome here. Maya stared at him, the words catching her off guard. His eyes were steady, his tone sincere. She had heard offers of help before, but they always came with conditions, expectations, demands, betrayals. Yet this man's demeanor was different. There was no hidden agenda in his gaze, only quiet compassion. For a moment, Maya considered revealing the truth. Crash, her flight from Valdris, her desperation to protect Kira. But fear held her back. Instead, she nodded curtly. Thank you. Marcus didn't press further. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable, and rose to tend the fire. As the night deepened, Maya found herself studying Marcus. A flicker of curiosity broke through her guarded exterior. There was a weight in his movements, a heaviness that spoke of loss. She recognized it had lived it. Whatever this man had endured, it had carved deep lines into his soul, lines she could almost see etched across his face. For the first time since Darius's betrayal, Maya felt a sliver of safety. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was something. Close. And for now, that was enough. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the world silent and still. Inside, beneath the warm glow of the fire, two strangers sat quietly, each unknowingly beginning a journey that would change their lives forever. Morning arrived slowly over the farm, pale light creeping through the mist. Maya awoke with a start, her body instinctively tensing as her mind snapped to awareness. She remained on edge, her instincts honed from years of surviving in a hostile world. The small room was unfamiliar, the warmth from the fireplace a stark contrast to the harsh conditions she and Kira had endured in recent weeks. For a moment, she didn't recognize the muted sounds of this world, the chirping birds, the creak of wooden beams in the farmhouse, the distant lowing of cattle. Then she saw Kira. Her daughter was still curled up on the sofa, her small body cocooned in a blanket Marcus had provided. Kira's breathing was soft and even, her face relaxed in a way Maya hadn't seen in months. It was a sight that simultaneously warmed and broke Maya's heart. The sound of clinking dishes drew Maya's attention to the kitchen. She stiffened, her hand instinctively searching for the jagged metal shard she had kept close during the night. It was still there, tucked into the folds of her makeshift belt. Quietly, she rose, padding toward the sound on silent feet. Marcus stood at the counter, his back to her. The sleeves of his flannel shirt were rolled up, exposing forearms marked with faded scars, remnants of a life that hinted at labor and hardship. He moved with quiet efficiency, cracking eggs into a bowl and stirring them with a fork. The soft hiss of a pan heating on the stove filled the silence. Maya lingered in the doorway, her sharp gaze assessing every detail. The kitchen was small but well maintained, its surfaces worn from years of use but clean. Herbs hung drying from the rafters, their earthy scent mixing with the aroma of coffee brewing on the counter. "You're up early," Marcus said without turning, his voice breaking the stillness. He wasn't looking at her, but there was no mistaking the awareness in his tone. "Didn't think I'd hear you over the floorboards." Maya straightened, stepping into the room with measured caution. I couldn't sleep. Marcus glanced at her over his shoulder, his expression neutral. I understand that. There's coffee if you want some. Eggs will be ready soon. Maya didn't respond. She crossed her arms, her gaze flicking to the window. The fields outside were blanketed in mist, the rising sun casting a soft glow over the horizon. It was eerily peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of her recent life. Marcus turned back to his work, seeming unbothered by her silence. He cooked with the same quiet competence that had marked his actions the night before, as though accustomed to doing everything alone. The realization pricked at Maya's curiosity, though she quickly pushed the thought aside. Your daughter's still asleep? He asked after a moment. Yes, Maya replied, her tone clipped. She wasn't ready to share more. Marcus didn't press further. He plated the eggs and set them on the table along with a loaf of fresh bread. Help yourself, he said simply, pouring a cup of coffee and sitting down at the table. He didn't eat, just sipped his coffee and gazed out the window. Kira's soft footsteps broke the silence. She appeared in the doorway, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Her wide eyes flicked between Maya and Marcus, hesitant but curious. Good morning, Marcus said, his voice softer than before. You hungry? Kira hesitated, glancing at her mother for permission. Maya gave a small nod, and Kira approached the table, her movements cautious but no longer fearful. Marcus cut a slice of bread and placed it on a plate, pushing it toward her. Kira took it with both hands, her small fingers gripping the edges as though it might disappear. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus smiled faintly. You're welcome. Over the next few days, a tentative routine began to take shape. Marcus provided food and shelter without asking for anything in return, and Maya allowed herself to cautiously lower her defenses. Though only slightly, she spent her days helping Kira adjust to the new environment, teaching her the names of this world's creatures and marveling at the simple beauty of things they had never encountered before. The vibrant green of grass, the warmth of sunlight unfiltered by the harsh metallic skyline of Valdris, the way rain felt soft and cool rather than biting and cold. Marcus stayed busy with his work, tending to the fields and repairing the damage from the storm. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, giving Maya and Kira the space they clearly needed. Yet his quiet presence was a constant, and Maya found herself observing him more than she cared to admit. There was a weight to Marcus, a heaviness in his movements, a quiet sadness in his eyes that mirrored her own. It wasn't pity, though. It was understanding, the kind that only came from surviving something that left you broken and rebuilding yourself piece by piece. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Maya found herself sitting on the porch steps. Kira was inside, fast asleep after a day spent chasing butterflies in the field. The air was cool, the chirping of crickets filling the silence. Marcus joined her, sitting a respectful distance away. He held a mug of coffee in his hands, the steam curling into the fading light. You've been quiet, he said after a long pause. Maya glanced at him, her expression guarded. I don't have much to say. That's fair, he replied. But sometimes saying it out loud helps. She looked away, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The weight of her past pressed heavily on her chest, a burden she had carried alone for so long. But something about Marcus's calm, unassuming presence made her want to let go. Just a little. My husband left us, she said finally, her voice flat. Abandoned us. Where I come from, that's worse than death. Marcus didn't interrupt, his eyes steady as he listened. I had to leave, Maya continued, her tone softening. Not for me, but for Kira. She deserves better than what our world offered. Marcus nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. Sounds like you've done everything you can to protect her." Maya looked at him then, surprised by the lack of judgment in his voice. "I have," she said, her voice firm. "And I'll keep doing it, no matter what." Marcus's lips twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. "I believe you." The silence that followed was different, less heavy, more understanding. For the first time since arriving on this world, Maya felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: hope. Inside the farmhouse, Kira stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly. Maya rose to check on her, pausing at the door. To glance back at Marcus. He was still sitting on the steps, staring out at the darkening fields. His shoulders were relaxed, his expression peaceful. For the first time, Maya wondered if this place, this quiet farm on a strange, distant world, could truly be a home. The days stretched into weeks, and a fragile sense of routine began to settle over the farmhouse. Maya found herself slowly easing into this life, though a part of her remained on edge. It was too simple, too peaceful. Life had taught her that such serenity was often fleeting. For Kira, the farm was a wonderland. Each day brought new discoveries: a fluttering butterfly, the soft bristle of grass beneath her feet, the curious antics of the chickens that Marcus kept in a small coop. Maya watched her daughter thrive in this new world, her laughter ringing out as she dashed across the fields. It was a sound Maya hadn't heard in what felt like years, and it filled her heart with both joy and dread. But Maya couldn't shake the shadow of her past. The scars left by her husband's betrayal and her society's judgment clung to her like a second skin. Even here, in the safety of Marcus's home, she couldn't banish the fear that it could all be ripped away. Marcus, as always, was a quiet presence. He rose before dawn, tending to the farm with practiced efficiency. Maya often joined him, helping in small ways, mending fences, collecting eggs, or simply keeping Kira occupied while he worked. Their conversations were sparse but meaningful, the silence between them comfortable rather than strained. Yet even as their bond deepened, Maya remained wary. She caught herself analyzing Marcus's every action, searching for ulterior motives that never seemed to exist. He was kind without being overbearing, generous without expecting anything in return. It baffled her. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the vegetable garden, Maya finally voiced the question that had been gnawing at her. "Why are you helping us?" Marcus paused, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. He looked at her, his gaze steady but unreadable. "Because you needed help," he said simply. Maya frowned, the answer too straightforward for her liking. People don't just do things out of kindness, not without wanting something in return. Marcus leaned against his shovel, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe that's been your experience," he said after a moment. "But not everyone's like that." The words struck a chord, but Maya didn't respond. She turned back to her work, her thoughts churning. That night, as the farmhouse settled into quiet, Maya sat by the fire, her mind restless. Kira had fallen asleep hours ago, her small body curled up in a nest of blankets. Marcus was in his room, the creak of floorboards signaling his movements as he prepared for bed. Maya stared into the flames, their flickering light casting shadows on the walls. She couldn't stay here forever, she told herself. This was temporary, a refuge, not a home. But the thought of leaving filled her with a cold dread. Where would they go? How would she keep Kira safe? Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft creak of the floorboards behind her. She turned to see Marcus standing in the doorway, his expression cautious but kind. "Can't sleep?" he asked, stepping into the room. Maya shook her head. "Too much on my mind." Marcus sat down in the chair across from her, cradling a mug of tea in his hands. For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the faint rustle of wind outside. You don't have to decide anything right now, Marcus said quietly, as though reading her thoughts. You and Kira can stay as long as you need. Maya's chest tightened. And what happens when you change your mind? She asked, her voice sharp. When you decide we're too much trouble? Marcus's brow furrowed, his gaze steady. I won't. How can? You be so sure? She demanded, her voice rising. People always leave, always. But Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Maybe you're right, he said softly. Maybe most people do, but I'm not most people. Maya stared at him, her heart pounding. There was something in his eyes and honesty that unnerved her. It wasn't pity or obligation. It was something deeper, something she wasn't sure she could. Trust. I can't lose her, she whispered, her voice breaking. She's all I have. You won't, Marcus said, his voice firm. Not while you're here. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. For the first time in years, Maya felt the faint stirrings of trust. It was fragile, like a fledgling taking its first steps, but it was there. The following days passed. In a blur of activity, Marcus taught Maya the rhythms of the farm, how to tend to the animals, when to plant and harvest the crops, the intricacies of maintaining the machinery that kept everything running. Maya found herself enjoying the work, the physical effort grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. Kira, too, thrived in this environment. She followed Marcus around like a shadow, her endless questions bringing a rare smile to his face. Maya watched from a distance, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and fear. She wanted to believe this could last, but the fear of losing it was ever present. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Maya finally broached the subject. That had been weighing on her mind. I can't keep depending on you, she said, her gaze fixed on the horizon. It's not fair. Marcus glanced at her, his expression calm. You're not a burden, if that's what you're thinking. But I am, she said, her voice firm. And I can't live like this, wondering when it's all going to fall apart. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. What do you want, Maya? The question caught her off guard. She turned to him, her brow furrowing. I want Kira to be safe. I want her to have a future. And what about you? Marcus pressed. What do you want for yourself? Maya hesitated, the question striking a nerve. She had spent so long focusing on Kira's needs that she hadn't allowed herself to consider her own desires. What did she want? Safety, yes, stability. But more than that, she realized she wanted a place to belong. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded, his expression understanding. Well, maybe that's something we can figure out together. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made Maya's chest ache. For the first time, she allowed herself to entertain the possibility that this life, this man could be the beginning of something more. But she also knew that taking that step would require courage she wasn't sure she had. The morning was crisp, the air carrying the faint scent of rain from the night before. A thin mist clung to the fields, softening the edges of the horizon. Maya stood on the farmhouse porch, watching as the sun broke through the clouds, its golden light spilling across the landscape. In the distance, Kira's laughter rang out as she chased a butterfly through the tall grass. Marcus was nearby, repairing the fence that bordered the field, his steady movements a reassuring constant. For a moment, Maya allowed herself to breathe deeply, the tension in her shoulders easing. It was an unfamiliar feeling piece. It felt fragile, like glass too thin to hold its shape, but it was there. She wrapped her arms around herself, the weight of the decision she had made the night before still heavy on her mind. The evening prior had been a turning point. After weeks of wrestling with her fears, Maya had finally allowed herself to confront them. She had waited until Kira was asleep, her small body tucked under a quilt Marcus had given her. Then, with a resolve born from desperation and hope, Maya had approached Marcus. He had been sitting by the fire, a book resting in his lap. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft crackle of the flames. Maya had stood in the doorway, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. "I need to talk to you," she had said. Her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Marcus had looked up, his expression open and calm. "All right." She had stepped into the room, her movements deliberate, and sat down across from him. For a moment, she couldn't find the words. They tangled in her throat, threatening to choke her. But she forced herself to speak. "I don't want to leave," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't stay like this uncertain, waiting for the day it all falls apart." Marcus had set his book aside, leaning forward slightly. "What are you saying?" Maya had taken a deep breath, her gaze locking onto his. "I'm saying I want more than shelter. I want stability, a home, a family." The words had hung in the air between them, heavy with vulnerability. Maya had braced herself for rejection, for disbelief. But what she had seen in Marcus's eyes had startled her. It wasn't pity or hesitation. It was understanding. "You're serious," he had said, his tone quiet but firm. "Yes," she had replied. "I know it's a lot to ask. I know this isn't what you signed up for, but I can't keep living in fear. And Kira, she deserves more than a mother who's always looking over her shoulder." Marcus had been silent for a long moment, his gaze thoughtful. Then he had nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "All right." Maya had blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "All right? I've been thinking about this." "For a while," he had admitted. "About you, about Kira. You've brought something back into this house I thought I'd lost forever. I wasn't sure if I could handle it, letting someone in again. But I want to try." His words had broken something in Maya, the wall she had spent years building cracking under the weight of his sincerity. She had looked away, blinking back tears, and nodded. "Okay, double quotes now," as she stood on the porch, watching Kira play in the morning light. Maya felt the first stirrings of hope. It wasn't a dramatic shift, her fears hadn't disappeared overnight. But for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something better. The transition wasn't seamless. Building a life together required patience and compromise. Maya and Marcus learned to navigate their differences, her sharp edges honed by survival against his quiet steadiness. They found common ground in their shared determination to give Kira a stable, happy life. Kira, for her part, flourished in this new dynamic. She adored Marcus, following him around the farm and peppering him with endless questions. He answered, each one with patience, his gruff exterior softening in her presence. Maya watched their bond grow with a mixture of gratitude and awe, her heart aching with the knowledge that Marcus had become the father Kira had never known. The challenges they faced were not insignificant. There were practical matters to address, introducing Maya and Kira to the few neighbors who occasionally stopped by, explaining their presence without revealing too much. Marcus handled it with characteristic calm, weaving a story about distant relatives in need of help. It wasn't entirely a lie, he told Maya later. In his eyes, they had become family. There were also moments of tension, particularly when Maya's past threatened to intrude on their new life. She had nightmares vivid, haunting dreams of Darius's betrayal and the judgmental stares of her people. Marcus learned to recognize the signs, sitting with her in silence until the worst of it passed. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, the stars spread like a tapestry above them, Maya turned to Marcus. "Do you think they'll ever come for us?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Your people?" Marcus asked, glancing at her. She nodded. "If they find out where we are, I don't know what they'll do." Marcus's expression hardened, his gaze steady. "If they come, we'll deal with it together." The simplicity of his answer calmed her in a way she couldn't explain. She nodded, her fingers brushing against his as they rested on the wooden armrest. The contact was brief, but it sent a warmth through her that lingered long after. Months passed, and the seasons changed. The farm flourished under their combined efforts, and the house, once quiet and lonely, became a place of laughter and life. Marcus taught Maya how to operate the old tractor, her initial frustration giving way to laughter as she navigated the uneven terrain. Maya, in turn, shared stories of Valdris with Kira and Marcus, her voice weaving a tapestry of a world both beautiful and flawed. The three of them found a rhythm, their lives intertwining in ways none of them had expected. They were still learning, still growing, but for the first time they felt like a family. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya stood in the field watching Marcus and Kira chase each other through the tall grass. Kira's laughter echoed across the farm, and Marcus's rare smile lit up his face. Maya felt her chest tighten, the weight of her fears and doubts momentarily lifting. She had spent so long running, so long protecting herself and Kira from a world that had turned its back on them. But here, in this quiet corner of a distant planet, she had found something she hadn't dared to hope for, a place to belong. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Maya joined them in the field, her heart full and her steps light. Together, they faced the unknown, no longer alone but as a family bound by love, resilience, and the promise of a future worth fighting for. The years that followed brought their own challenges and triumphs. Kira grew strong and confident, her childhood fears replaced by the security of unconditional love. She learned to tend the animals with gentle hands, to read the weather patterns that guided the farm's rhythms, and to find joy in the simple pleasures of this world she now called home. Maya discovered parts of herself she had forgotten existed. The woman who had once lived in fear gradually gave way to someone stronger, someone who could laugh freely and dream of tomorrow without the constant shadow of yesterday's pain. She learned to trust not just Marcus, but herself, her instincts, her worth, her right to happiness. Marcus, too, found healing in their presence. The empty spaces in his life, the silence that had once echoed through the farmhouse, were filled with warmth and purpose. He watched Kira take her first confident steps on the tractor, helped Maya plant her first successful garden, and slowly allowed himself to believe that perhaps he deserved this second chance at family. Together, they built something neither Maya nor Marcus had thought possible when they first met that stormy night, a home not just made of walls and roof, but of trust, understanding, and the quiet certainty that they would face whatever came next as one. The stars that had once seemed cold and indifferent to Maya now watched over them like silent guardians, witnesses to a love that had grown from desperation and hope into something unbreakable. And in the gentle light of dawn each morning, as the mist lifted from the fields and Kira's laughter carried on the wind, Maya knew that their journey had led them exactly where they belonged.